Hi, John Billamek here. Let's spend the next few minutes talking about how to know what to say when you give a presentation at a scientific conference, especially during a poster session where you may not have a long time to share a lot of details. Now, many students that I work with treat presentations like an exam where they need to demonstrate their knowledge about the details of a project. I mean, some presentations are like this, like in a classroom setting, but at research conferences or places where you're trying to network, the goal is not to demonstrate knowledge as much as it is to generate engagement in your work. So to do this, we need to convey meaning more than we need to convey detail. And the best way to convey meaning is through storytelling. So one of the key features of effective storytelling is the element of cause and effect. Here are two one-sentence stories that illustrate this. The first one is the king died and then the queen died. Now, this is not a story. It's just stating what happened. It's just a short list of details. But compare this to the king died and then the queen died of a broken heart. Now, this is a story. Why? Because it shows cause and effect. In just a few words, you can picture the relationship between characters and connect to their journey. So with any story you tell, including the story of your research, don't just list your points. Prior research shows X, and then I did Y, and then I found Z. In fact, instead of saying and then, try to say or think about and therefore. Like, my experiences in prior research showed me the importance of X. And therefore, because of the importance of X, we set out to do Y. And therefore, from doing Y, we now have evidence of Z. Your presentation should tell the story of your project. So you want to start with something we call the origin story, the cause that set it all in motion. Why is this topic important to the field and to you? Then this cause, this origin, led to your overall study objective or research question. Therefore, I sought to answer the research question A or to test hypothesis A. That's where you get specific. Then your objective or your research question led you to your method. Therefore, I did procedure B, or therefore, I administered questionnaire at the clinic on topic B. And this method led you to these results. From procedure B, we got the following data, C. And these results led you to draw these conclusions. From data C, we conclude that there is support for hypothesis A, which means implication D for the field, and we should try to do future direction E next. So all the things connect together. If you want to tell a story, you have to map out the connections. And this can be very hard to do on the fly. So I recommend you try to write a short script, a lightning script. Now, a lightning script is not something you should memorize or read from. It's just a chance to think about what you might say before you say it and how the different points you make connect with each other. I want to challenge you to aim for about 2.5 minutes so you don't exceed 3 minutes. These really shouldn't exceed 3 minutes in general. Once you get to be elite level, you could do this in 90 seconds and convey the meaning of your project very well. It all comes down to saying less. It's never about talking faster. It's always about saying fewer words. That can be scary to do, but the best presentations are those that don't answer every question, questions maybe I didn't even have. Instead, the best presentations are those that invite questions from the audience. So trust in your ability to be able to answer those questions that are raised. Or to say, that's a great question, I'll need to get back to you. Nothing else, that's another opportunity for networking. If you're giving a poster presentation, I recommend that with your script, you find anchors on your poster to prompt you as you talk. So think about where you will point at your poster as you present. I try to call those out with little pointer finger icons in the slides to follow. And then lastly, avoid what I call lightning killers, the rabbit holes we go down that just involve sharing much more detail than is necessary to convey meaning. In fact, much more detail that prevents you from conveying meaning. We get lost in the weeds and lose track of the entire story. So to prepare a lightning script, we'll start with the introduction. And that should answer the question, why did you do this project? Spend 30 to 45 seconds on this. So you start with an origin story for your project. This could be a short story, example, or statistic that illustrates the problem you studied, or maybe a personal experience that got you interested in the problem, something you went through, something your family went through, something you saw in the news. but we want to try to make it concrete and real. And it should set the stage for the work that you did. I love it when people find an anchor on their poster, like a photo or a phrase that conveys the idea of the origin story. So a convincing photo or diagram, or a key phrase that's emphasized on your poster, or something you could point to while you're talking. That'll help you remember what you're trying to say as you're saying it. What's the lightning killer in the introduction? Definitely citation overload or detail overload. Avoid giving details about prior studies in a way that doesn't contribute to the story of your project. Now, you sometimes need to talk about some of the prior research, but it's better just to mention one or two things about the current state of knowledge, the current state of the field, or even the gap of knowledge that your study will help to close. So refer to prior studies only in ways that build the story. You can list your references so people know what you're referring to, what papers that you're building your work on, but you don't need to get into saying the names of authors. I like when we just point to the references rather than saying the author's names, or even better still, just summarize at a high level prior research shows. A great question your audience can ask you is, well, what was the prior research? And you can say, these are the citations I used. But you're answering the question once it's been asked, not answering a question that hasn't been asked. And you want to end your introduction by clearly stating your research question. So what is this about? From the origin story, what was the objective of this specific project? And again, as far as having an anchor on the poster, I love it when you can point to the research question clearly printed on your poster. How about the methods section? Give a little bit more time to this, but not much time, 45 to 60 seconds. Here you just want to point out a few highlights from the methods that you employed. It's a great place to point to an image or a phrase that reflects any procedures or data collection instruments or surveys or aspects of your method that you think are relevant. Don't go into too much detail. Critical here is that you put yourself in the story. You need to be kind of like Dora the Explorer or Indiana Jones, like an adventurer that's on an adventure. Your research was a journey that you went on to find an answer to that research question, a research question that was sparked by your origin story. Cause and effect, right? So put yourself in the story. Use the first person. I did this. Or if you feel like it was something that was more collaborative, you can say we did this or our team did this. Tell it in the past tense. Tell the story of the journey that you've been on. The lightning killer is diving into deep technical detail on the methods, going too heavy on the names of different compounds or procedures or questionnaires or things like this. Instead, try to keep it at a high level with just enough detail. We used a procedure called X that I can tell you more about if you're interested, to do Y for this reason, etc. Now, if you feel the need to include a data, make it feel like it's part of the story, pairing what you did with why you did it. So like to isolate the sample, we first washed it with a basic solution and plated it to examine using the microscope, something like that. And this is the key thing. Be brave enough to say less. It takes a little bit of courage not to put it all out there, right? That you feel like someone's going to catch you in something you didn't know. But I promise you, your talk will be much more engaging if we allow the audience to ask questions. The results, you can spend 30 to 45 seconds on this to summarize what did you find, present the main findings of your research, summarizing the outcomes and key data points. Again, as an anchor, point to the specific parts of the figures or numbers in a table that correspond to the results as you describe them. Make this visual. And also use those things you're pointing to remind yourself what you wanted to say. That means you don't have to memorize your script, but use your poster to kind of prompt you. The lightning killer is, again, too much detail, giving too many numbers. And this especially comes up with like participant or sample characteristics. Sometimes we'll see people say, well, the sample included of 154 adult women ranging in age from 38 to 61 years with an average age of this, and this percentage spoke Spanish language exclusively, and this percentage had Medi-Cal insurance, and just getting into lots and lots of detail. Better just to summarize just the very few, very most important data points or details in a few words, and only give an exact number when you're talking when it's very important. So I liked saying something like, our sample consisted of mostly middle-aged Latino women who primarily spoke Spanish, and in just whatever details are just extremely relevant, but not in any granular level. How about the conclusions? This is spending 30 seconds to put a bow on it all, to tie it into what did the results mean, to connect it back to your origin story where you introduced the problem or issue that you want to study. What do the results mean with respect to the issue that your origin story revealed? This is where you discuss the significance and potential implications of your findings, and you conclude with a succinct take-home message and then drop the mic, and then you're done. Point to an image or a phrase that reflects the take-home message. That could be the headline of your presentation. It could be a photo of someone who's affected. It could take it back to the origin story or your objective statement, but point to something that reflects the take-home message. Again, the lightning killer is obsessing on limitations. So I think people feel like, oh, I have to talk about the limitations. Well, limitations we always incorrectly think of as the weaknesses of our study, but really limitations are just an expression of how far can we take these conclusions from the study. So most lightning presentations don't even need to mention limitations. I don't want you to stop your story to talk about the limitations. That's kind of like distracting, right? I would avoid saying the study was limited by a small sample and a very short time frame, and I'm just a student and I don't know any, it's just don't get into that. It sounds almost like apologetic. Instead, focus on what you can conclude for the project. How far can you take this data? What could be done next to expand the research? So I'll say things like, at least for this single health system, we see preliminary evidence that X does reduce Y. And this suggests that we might want to replicate this across multiple sites. But for now, our study suggests that X could be a promising approach to make a difference for people living with Y, and then drop the mic. Okay. So to summarize, tell the story of your project, connecting point to point via cause and effect. Include your origin story that kind of says what put you on this thing. That's the first cause that leads to the effect of stating your research question. Put yourself in the story. This is your adventure. You should be at the middle of it, of the study itself. Connect your lightning script to anchors on the poster that you can point to. This both sparks your memory and is also a great visual aid to guide the listener. Gives them something to look at. Too much detail is a lightning killer. So try not to, just try to find places you can say less. Remember, to get under 3 minutes or to get down to 90 seconds, you have to say fewer things. You don't talk too slow. You're just talking fast enough, or maybe even too fast, but saying too many things. So to get your, so too much detail is the lightning killer. It disrupts the flow and it will make it impossible for you to keep your presentation below 3 minutes. And like I said, be brave enough to say less, let them ask questions. So where do we begin? Well, I like starting with drafting the origin story. And so here's a little activity I can suggest that you can try on your own, or even better yet, with a small group to draft your origin story for this work. So first thing I like to see is you start with some timed writing on your own. I recommend about 4 minutes. Write about a brief origin story, a story that is kind of your story behind the problem that your project addresses. Why is the problem important, and why are you interested in solving it? Maybe there's a story. It could be a real story for your life, from someone in your family, something you read about in the news or on social media. It could be a hypothetical where you just kind of say, imagine you were in a situation like this, right? They can convey your interest in the problem you're trying to solve with your research. Think about, who do you do this work for and how this work can benefit that group or can honor those people. Or consider a hypothetical person or hypothetical community. We're just trying to paint a picture here. It's okay to tie in some data or some definitions, but really try to connect to the human element of the issue. So I don't want there to be too much on technical, but more about like getting people interested in your topic. Then either on your own, after you finish your reflective writing, either on your own or better still in a group, share what you wrote for your origin story. Make sure everyone has a chance to share. I like to use this term first pitch, worst pitch, kind of a judgment-free zone, that what you write right away shouldn't be like super good yet, but these are great ideas to get started. And then it's much easier to refine. If you're with a group, I'd like you to discuss, refine, and choose one origin story to share out, or to use in your script. So once you have your origin story, then you just build the bridge to each section that follows. You build the bridge from the origin story to the main objective or the research study. I experienced this, I saw this, and therefore I wanted to answer this research question. And then, because I have this research question, therefore I engage in this method to study it. Then, because I engage in this method, therefore I now have this data to share in my results. Then, because I have this data and because the data were as such, Therefore, I can conclude the following. I can make the following conclusions. I can state the following implications. I can highlight the future directions this might take. Cause and effect, step by step. Write the script, tell the story. I want to wish you lots of luck in preparing your presentation, and I hope you take a chance on writing the script. I think you won't regret it. I can't wait to hear the stories you will tell. Thank you very much.